and welcome to the OrasiLabs webinar, where we will discuss how OrasiLabs can help drive product adoption through effective software application training. My name is Karen Spencer, and I also have Joe Schultz joining me today. I'm going to kick us off with a brief introduction to OrasiLabs, as well as a high-level overview of what OrasiLabs is and how it benefits software providers. Then we'll move into a demo where Joe will demonstrate how software companies can leverage OrasiLabs to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of your software application training. And Joe, I was thinking about this as I was preparing today, and of course the focus today is software companies that are training both their end users as well as their partners. And this is certainly an audience that is extremely relevant to both of our backgrounds. I know we've both spent time delivering software training for some of our partners, as well as participating as a student in lots of different partner training.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years now, and I would love to have had a product like OrasiLabs to be able to do all this stuff for me that, I've had to do manually in the past.
That's right, right? You think of the time savings that we go through, and we'll get into that here in just a bit. So let's first talk a little bit about what OrasiLabs is. OrasiLabs allows you to create inexpensive, hands-on training environments in the cloud. Now, these environments can be as simple as a browser, or they can be multi-server environments. It really just depends on what type of application you are teaching. OrasiLabs then quickly spins up personalized copies for each student in each class. And students only need a browser and an internet connection to access their own dedicated training environment. And each student lab is set up with exactly what the student needs for any hands-on participation. And OrasiLabs can actually be used for any type of training. So that includes on-site, virtual instructor-led classes, which is probably what we see the most of, virtual on-demand classes, hands-on workshops, and even large group seminars. Now, in all cases, students can quickly and easily use their OrasiLabs environment to practice any of those skills being taught. And Joe, before we talk about specific benefits, I was going to ask you, you alluded to this earlier, but I was going to ask you, in your days of delivering or taking a software training class, what's one challenge that you experience?
Well, for me, the biggest problem is the setup time. I used to have to fly in a day or two, sometimes before, to set up the classroom, to actually install software and get the data files loaded and all that kind of stuff. And even when I went to places where students were going to use their own machine, if they were going to bring their laptops into the conference room, for example, I had to worry about making sure everybody had the same version and they've got all the sample training files they needed. And so it's all that setup, whether it's extra travel time or whether it's end up taking class time that I lose trying to get all that done. So having all these labs pre-built is probably that's the biggest benefit that I've got.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's not, it's pre-built is absolutely, I think we've all, kind of spent that time, right, with that setup. But it's also, you bring up a good point, is making sure students have exactly what they need, right? It's like if you're going to ask students to run a report or add a new customer or whatever, you've got to make sure that software, installation is and configuration is sitting there ready to go, with exactly the student needs, with what the student needs, so they can concentrate on practicing those skills. Now that takes us right into, what are some of the key benefits that we see customers of ours that happen to be software companies, what are some of the benefits that they've really gained from this? So I wanted to spend a minute talking about that. We've already mentioned, some of these, but OrasiLabs, just so you know, it does leverage the AWS cloud. So what that means is it makes it an extremely cost-effective way for you to reach more students, more partners, and therefore drive product adoption. Because let's face it, knowledgeable users are productive users. Productive users are ones that are gaining value from your software. And those are people, of course, that are going to be more likely to stick around. And since instructors can see exactly what their students are doing, so Joe mentioned virtual, what you'll see in the demo is instructors can see exactly what those virtual students are doing. You can better assess who understands the material, who might need a little more assistance and that type of thing. Now, these hands-on environments that we're talking about, these in OrasiLabs are created with reusable templates set up once and then reused for all students in a class and even across classes. So Joe mentioned that earlier, right, is all the time that you save with the setup before class. But not only do you save time before class, you also save time during class. So since everyone's environment is set up with exactly what they need for class, you don't have to rely on students setting up their own environment. And you mentioned this earlier, Joe, because although intentions are very, very good, we've all lost valuable class time troubleshooting those environments that the students have set up. Now, we also know that your training demand can vary based on many factors. Some of you, it might be seasonal, just based on the type of software you have, or maybe your training needs increase around a major release. With OrasiLabs, it's a consumption-based model, so you only pay for what you use. You can easily scale up or scale down depending on your needs. So there's no annual contract you have to sign. If you invite a bunch of students and some of them don't show up, that's fine. You actually don't pay for those students that don't show up. So it's really easy to get started and really easy to scale up and scale down. Now, even though you're training, moving training environments to the cloud can be certainly cost effective. Those cloud providers, have made it very cost effective. Those can actually be quite complex and overwhelming. So OrasiLabs actually removes that complexity with an interface built specifically for training. And you'll see that here in a second in Joe's demo. So let's talk a little bit before that demo, let's talk a little bit about how does it work and just kind of set the stage for that. Well, it all starts with a template. Templates are used to create those hands-on environments for students and instructors. They're typically going to consist of one or more virtual resources, like a virtual machine, a database, maybe a port. Template is also where you're going to install and configure any software that your student needs to complete that class. Then once the template is set up, you can create that class. And classes in OrasiLabs is really just a training event that has a start date and an end date. I mentioned earlier, it could be instructor-led, could be on demand, various use cases are supported here. Each class is going to use a template to define that hands-on environment. And OrasiLabs will then take care of starting and stopping those environments for both students and instructors. And each class is going to have a roster of students and instructors that are actually authorized to access that class. Then as an instructor, when I'm ready to begin teaching, I can simply start the class. That's going to allow students to log in. As an instructor, I can have my own lab for any instructional activity, maybe a presentation. Typically, I'm going to demonstrate something to those students, so I can broadcast my lab to the students so they can watch what I'm doing. And then when it's time for students to work on their own, they can open up their dedicated lab for their hands-on practice. Now, at this point, they're interacting with a cloud resource just as if it was installed locally. And again, since that environment was created based on the template, it has everything set up perfectly to match this course curriculum. Then as the students work on their own labs, Joe mentioned, the move to so much virtual training, but as students work on their own labs, the instructor can watch what those students are doing with the over-the-shoulder view. This view lets me, as an instructor, see live thumbnails for as many students as I want to monitor. I can see who's doing okay. I can see who's stuck, maybe and needs extra help. In the example I'm showing here, I've got 3 students there towards the bottom. I can see that one of them isn't even connected. So that's certainly something I'd want to address. And then as I'm helping these students, I can even unlock the student lab if I need to. So that I can control the mouse and keyboard and maybe, get them past their problem, demonstrate something to them. So as an instructor, I can see what they're doing. I've got also full control over those labs. So Joe, that's a quick overview of what OrasiLabs is, a little bit about how it works. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to you so we can take a look at OrasiLabs and see how it can be used by software providers.
And so you should be seeing now the email invitation for Marie Curie. Can you see that, Karen?
Correct. Yep.
All right, excellent. So for OrasiLabs students, everything starts with an email. It all starts with a link directly into our lab. The idea of OrasiLabs is that it's all meant to be very simple, very straightforward, whether your student is a very technical kind of, technically savvy student, or whether it's somebody whose job is something else and they don't really understand computers. It doesn't make any difference. So in this example, what I've done is I've invited Marie Curie, our little sample student here, to a class about how to use Acrobat Reader. So I'm going to teach her how to use Acrobat Reader. She's gotten an email invitation from our system. In this case, it's branded, of course, with our name and logo, but in real life, this would be your software company's name and logo. And so Marie gets, the invitation with information about the class, what time it is, and she can check her internet connection to make sure she's got a valid connection to the internet and all that. And when she's ready, all she has to do literally is just press this join class button right inside the email. And this pops Marie right into the class portal. So, this, Karen, is what students see when they log in. So now Marie's in our electronic classroom, and all she has to do, much like a Zoom or Teams meeting, is join that conference. And now Marie can see what the instructor is doing. She can also hear him. We also have a built-in chat as well, so that she can engage with the instructor just like she would if she were in a physical classroom. Now, at this point, the instructor would be showing the software. So you can see, Joe Schultz, me as the instructor. So I'm presenting the Acrobat Reader, and I'd be exercising the menu options and explaining how to do things and all of that. So this would work just like any online meeting. When it's time for Marie then to do some real work, this is where OrasiLabs really comes in. So what Marie can do is put my display, my projection, into a little picture-in-a-picture window. So this is a little movable, sizable inset window that shows my instructor display. And now she can open up her lab, which is an identical copy of mine, but specific to her. And she can open up that in the background and actually walk through the exercise. So, you can imagine in the foreground, I would be showing her, okay, now open the class files. So she clicks the class files, and then she sees the libraries for this class presented. So this is the training material that I, as an instructor, associate with the class. It automatically shows up for her in her lab. And now she can go into the lesson and, whatever, open up a sample data sheet or something in this example. So she would be following along with me in the foreground, watching me in my projector window, so to speak, little inset window, and then she'd be following along with the exercise in the background. And you can imagine, Karen, at the same time, I'm watching her. So not only am I projecting from my screen, but I can also watch all of the students and see what they're doing in real time. So if Marie clicks on the wrong button or opens the wrong screen or isn't doing anything, I could verbally prompt her and say, hey, Marie, what's going on? Or just like I would in a classroom if I saw somebody was lost or they weren't paying attention or whatever. Now, I've been talking about how I can engage with Marie, but Marie can also engage with me as well. So anytime she has a question or problem, she's got a variety of ways to talk to either myself or other students. As I mentioned, there's a built-in chat facility where Marie can post questions. She can ask me for help. She can also actually raise her hand here just by clicking a button in the interface, which signals me that she needs some help, for example. So, she can ask questions and get help whenever she needs help. And then I can take over her machine if I need to help her out with something. So that's kind of the student interface. There's really not a whole lot to it, and that's intentional. We intentionally made the interface very clean, very easy. 1 or 2 clicks and Marie's right where she needs to be in the lab working. She's working on these remote machines through the browser without having to understand what's happening or where the machine's running or any of the background technology that's part of it. And so that's kind of what the student sees. So now what I'll do is I'll switch and show you what the instructor sees to get an idea of how the two are working in tandem. So let's click over to the instructor's view. So this is my instructor portal, if you will. I'm logged in this case, as myself, as the instructor. And, as we talked about, I've been displaying my screen for students to see. So I can use this broadcast in order to show them how to use the software. I do that by using my own lab, which is just a copy of the same lab that we saw Marie using. It's a live copy. Instructors could also use their local PC. So sometimes instructors will prefer to use their personal machine because they've got instructional materials set up already, or they want to show PowerPoints directly. I tend to like to use the lab because then everything the student sees is click for click the same as what I'm doing right here in the software environment. And then when students go to do their exercises, that over the shoulder view that I talked about is this Student Labs tab. And this is where I can see which students are logged in, whether they've been active or not, and then what they're actually doing. So like in this case, I can see that Marie Curie's logged in. She's been active within the last 5 minutes because her circle is green. After 5 minutes, it'll go yellow, and after 10 minutes, it goes to red. So I can get an idea of whether students are engaged, whether they're participating in the class or not. I can even watch their machines just by clicking the little button here for the watch list, either one student at a time or in groups, or I can just add all, for example. And so in this example, Marie's the only student logged in. So I see Marie's screen and the other two students haven't connected yet. These are live thumbnails of the student machine. So if Marie was moving her mouse right now, I would see everything she's doing in real time. We'd also, of course, have the audio channel so we could be talking and chatting as well. Now, in our example before, Marie raised her hand. So I have an electronic help queue that I can use to manage what students have raised their hand and keep track of who I've helped and who I haven't. Now, in a real case, I would actually see a live pop-up when the student raised their hands, but I talked too long, so I don't see it in this view, but I can always go to the help queue and see which students have raised their hands. So in this case, I've got 2 students that have asked for help, and I would say, oh, well, I'm gonna go help Marie now. So I'll go take a look at Marie's screen, maybe I'll talk to her, maybe I'll chat privately to her, and I might even dive into her lab so that I can focus on what she's doing and see everything she's doing here on the screen. If Marie's really lost and I need to help her out, I can even click this little unlock button. And now I have control of her mouse and keyboard. So I can, click the menu options that she's supposed to do and kind of get her back on track with the software that I'm trying to teach her. So, Karen, back in the day, this saves us from having to get up from our podium and walk across the room, right? And grab somebody's mouse and move it around when they were really lost. So I could do this with a couple of clicks. And then, of course, once I've helped Marie, I can pop back into the classroom and, help the next person. Again, go back to my help queue, see who else I need to help. And in this example, I'll say, well, I've helped Marie. Now I'm going to go help Albert, for example. So it lets me kind of, manage the classroom. Now, in this example, I've just got 3 students, and you can see I can scroll up and down pretty easily. I can even kind of scroll so that they're all on the screen at once. But we can handle any number of students in OrasiLabs. So I can easily, resize this down and put 50 students on here if I have that many in my class. Heaven forbid that I would actually have 50 students. That'd be really hard to keep up with. But you can also have multiple instructors, and you can have divide the class up into groups if you need to. So I could be teaching, for example, while Karen's helping students out in the background, using the same tools and interface that you see here for me as the instructor.
This is great, Joe. One thing I was thinking too is, we love for students to ask questions, right? And I think any of us that are instructors encourage questions, but there are some students that don't always ask those questions, and being able to see, in one view, especially in a virtual situation, what those students are doing. It's sometimes I have found that it allows me to be a little proactive, right, in reaching out to students when I see that they're struggling. So I think this view is just invaluable to instructors.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, it lets me anticipate the question the student will have once they get up the nerve to raise their hand and ask the question, right? Because I can see that they're going wrong. I mean, I had one case where I was teaching a class and I said, okay, everybody go to the file menu or whatever it was. And they all went somewhere else that I didn't expect. And it was just because, there were multiple places they could have clicked in the interface. And so my instructions were a little vague. And And so I was very quickly able to see that, oh, well, 7 out of the 8 students went the wrong way. So I could say, well, now wait a minute, for those of you that were over here, you need to do this instead or whatever. So I can kind of self-correct along the way, and I can anticipate these student questions. So it lets me keep an eye on things. As I said, without the student having to raise their hand and embarrass themselves by admitting that they're in the wrong place. So that's really all there is to this, to the instructor view. What you didn't see was that I started the class just by clicking the big green button. And what this did is it started up all the labs for me. It started the conference, and then I started my sharing. So it's just a couple clicks for the instructor to start the class, just like it's a couple clicks for the student to get directly into their labs. In this example, what I've done then is I've created a template called Windows 22 with Acrobat Reader. And this is the template I was using to build this class from. So this is the software environment that I created that had everything all set up for the students. I also use something we have called libraries, which are sets of files that you can attach to class. And the idea of a library is that I can compartmentalize or create reusable components of training material that I can attach to classes in various combinations. So this lets me use, for example, the same software environment, like in this case, Acrobat Reader, for maybe different classes. I could teach a beginner class one day and an advanced class the other day, and I could reuse the same template with just different sets of libraries. Or maybe I teach a billing clerk a slightly different version than I teach the salespeople. And so I might reuse some of the content, but then have some specific content for each of the audiences. So libraries let me mix and match my training content with my software and dynamically build the classes the way I like. So that's the work that I did beforehand. What I'll do now real quickly is just show you those templates to give you an idea of how easy that is as well. So this is the list of templates I have. You can see, Karen, I've got about, 7 of them, something like that. Most customers actually only have 1 or 2. It depends on how many different versions of software you're teaching. For a software company, you might have, for example, a different template for each product that you want to teach. Maybe you have a different template for each version. So if you come out with new releases and you want to be able to teach the old release or the new release at the same time, you might have different templates for that. It's pretty easy to copy and clone and mix and match templates. Template is literally created just by kind of walking through this little wizard here, 4-step wizard, where you give it a name, you pick a base image to work from, and then you identify the size of the machine. That's really all there is to it. And then you open the template up and actually install the software. So in this example, as I said, I've got Acrobat Reader already pre-installed. I saved that as an image and then I published it, meaning that it's available for classes to use. Another one I've got here is this, Chrome auto launch. So it doesn't have Acrobat Reader on it, but it does have Chrome, and Chrome is set to auto launch for teaching like a web app, for example. Now, both of these are simple templates, meaning that they're a single operating system. The student gets one thumbnail like we just saw a minute ago. But it's very easy to make complex environments too. So for example, all I have to do is edit template resources here. And now I get a little drag and drop environment where I can add additional resources. So maybe instead of just needing a Windows client, the student also needs a database. So all I literally have to do is just drag across the database object. I pick the kind of database I want to use and what kind of machine type, and that's all there is to it. So now every student will have a Windows machine at their availability, and they'll also have a dedicated database object that they can play with during class. And so, creating these templates is really easy. You can build real complex environments with shared servers and databases, even controlling network access to these things with ports and such. Normally, we do all of the networking and isolate the classroom, but you can customize all of that as well. So templates are, pretty easy to build, pretty easy to manage. And we also, by the way, do have automated versioning in all of this. So if you do build something and you want to reuse it or you want to roll back, you have all of the state versioning built in as well.
That's
That's
great.
kind of
You know, I was going to say, you know, that rollback, students certainly learn by doing, but they do also learn by breaking things as well.
That's right. That's right. And we have, we have a lot of customers that will use labs to try and find defects in software, whether it's for a formal QA product, or like you say, it's a student just trying stuff out, and you encourage your students to experiment. So it's nice to be able to just click that button and roll back when somebody does something catastrophic that you didn't expect. We automatically save versions of templates and of all of the class labs anytime a machine is stopped or paused. So that's kind of what OrasiLabs is, Karen. We intentionally made it as simple and easy to use so that you can have non-technical students and non-technical instructors, in fact.
That's great, Joe. Thanks. We certainly saw both from a student's perspective, instructor's perspective, how it looks. Both of those perspectives are important, and saw a little bit in terms of how to create those environments as well. So that was great. One thing I was going to ask, and you alluded to it earlier when you mentioned folks using this for QA type situations, is, and this is a question I've gotten, is what other things, we talked a lot about training, but what other types of use cases could this be used for, or have you seen OrasiLabs be used for?
Well, that's a great question, Karen, because we actually have a lot of customers using it in a lot of different ways. Many of our software companies, for example, who are customers, they use it, of course, for traditional classroom education for their customers, whether it's on-site or in public kind of setting. But they also use it for training partners, for example, even new employees, like a new hire onboarding kind of environment. But you can also use it for other stuff. So we've got several software companies that use it for their pre-sales activities. So they've set up a little environment, a class, we would call it, that they can then invite customers to, so that the customer can play with the software without having to go through the trial of allocating hardware and installing it locally and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a nice safe space for customers to play with software, to do a test run, a trial, POC, without having to actually distribute software to the customer. We've also got several customers that use it for QA, internal QA. So their QA teams are setting up classes again, which are just test environments that they can then do user acceptance testing. They can do functional testing to try and break new features. They can do new release testing just to test a new build that's being proposed to be released. And anything, all of the development activities that might happen before the software actually goes live. It's a great, again, a safe space to install these components and try them out in a quick, easy, non-technical interface. And then you can, like we talked about, roll back and undo things when you break it or when it doesn't work the way you expect.
That's right. Go back to the point where it did work, right? That's great. That certainly helps understanding, some of those different use cases. Well, that is what we had to cover today. We certainly thank you, Joe, for the demo and all that great content. And we certainly appreciate everyone joining us today in terms of how OrasiLabs can help software providers. And we certainly hope to hear from you soon.